It's great to be here. I think that, I'm reminded of a line in A Course in Miracles which says, an idea grows stronger when it's shared. And as I look out into the room tonight, I am once again aware of the stereophonic effect of consciousness. I don't think that any of us this weekend are learning things we don't already know. I don't even mean that in the more traditional philosophical sense that you know everything already. I mean it in the sense that we've all read the same books and listened to the same tapes by now. There's a certain level of, metaphysics 101A that I think over the last 10, 20 years we have at least gotten our arms around. I'm not saying we're all some advanced metaphysicians, but I would be willing to speculate that the vast majority, if not all the people in this room, feel from one book or another, from one path or another, that the basics, we sort of have the basics under our belt. Is that correct? I think that, when an individual goes to therapy, you explore what is happening for you emotionally and psychologically and spiritually. But all of us are impacted at this time in history, as much as really at any time in history, by the collective drama of our generation. And yet, a society doesn't go to therapy. You go to therapy as an individual because you know it's important to face, to acknowledge, to process energies that are at work within you and which, while you might not hold them consciously, still subconsciously influence your life. You don't have to be crazy to go to therapy like people used to say years ago. We understand, as the Course in Miracles says, beware the danger of an unrecognized belief. Part of the work we do in recovery or therapy is to recognize beliefs that we are allowing to run our lives. And this is important work. But as I said, a society doesn't go to therapy. And yet there are thought forms running our society. There are thought forms determining what is happening in the world. And all that a society is, all that a civilization is, all that a planet is, for that matter, a human race is a collection of individuals. So if individuals are running their game, and you have enough individuals running a certain kind of game, then whatever thought forms that game represents influences us all. Many of us, in fact, certainly all of us in this room, and I think more people in this country and in this world probably than we even think, understand that there are some dark underpinnings to human civilization. I say dark because they are not life-giving. They are not life-producing. They are not life-honoring. And many people in this country and around the world are working very hard on making the kind of political and social and cultural changes that will turn our civilization around. I also think, though, that if our generation was to go to therapy, we would have to face the fact that things have not gone as well in our lifetime as we thought they would. We are a generation that thought when we were younger, we were going to get it right. We sang "All You Need Is Love" at political rallies. We were stoned when we sang it. And so what we learned from all of that, although about many things, I had the honor of meeting George McGovern one day. He was on a book tour. It was about a year ago. And it was in Denver, Colorado. He was on a book tour. I think I was too. And I ran into him coming out of a hotel. And I said, "Oh, Senator McGovern, I worked on your presidential campaign, and you were a hero of mine," or whatever. And he said, "And you know what? We were right." And I love that he said that. I love that he said that because there are so many ways in which we were. But we didn't have the personality structure. We didn't have the maturity on a personal level to bring forth the changes that we wanted to see happen in the world. I used to think that, well, we were stoned then and we're not stoned now. We were young then and we're not young now. I had all this, it all figured out that we would pull it off this time. That in this last chapter, basically we're entering this last final, hopefully glorious chapter, certainly of the baby boomer generation, we would in fact bring all of our resources together, integrate all the pieces within ourselves to enable us to become the people in whose presence these extraordinary changes would occur. And we would have a loving world, a world of peace and prosperity and harmony. But I think one of the challenges of growing up and growing older is the temptation to cynicism. When you see, as I said before, the generation that thought we were going to make it so much better can't honestly say that on our watch it's gotten all that much better, or at least we would have to say that on our watch some things have gotten quite a bit worse. And when you take a good look at that, you realize it's because there is a level on which we underestimated the darkness. The Course in Miracles says, do not underestimate the vengeance of the ego. It is suspicious at best and vicious at worst. And when we look at things like the bombings on the trains in Madrid, when we look at the World Trade Center, and on a certain level, most importantly of all, when we look at the forces in our own lives, both inside ourselves and outside, that hold us down and keep us small and make us old and weary, we realize that turning all this around is a harder job than we knew. But it's also said in Alcoholics Anonymous that every problem comes bearing its own solution. If you look at the Christian cross and also at the Jewish Star of David, one of the things that they share is a visual representation of an intersecting point between heaven and earth. The pyramid pointing upward, intersecting the pyramid pointing downward. The axis to the sky intersecting the axis of the earth. And when we talk about great spiritual masters, Jesus, for instance, is described in the Course in Miracles as having lived on earth but thought the thoughts of heaven. And while he lived on the earth, because he thought the thoughts of heaven, all disharmony of the mortal planes would dissolve in his presence. When Moses put his hand up and the Red Sea parted. In all the great religious traditions, we are given examples of people who lived on the earth and did not fix things. When Jesus walked on the water and his disciples had been so scared of the storm, thought they were going to die, said, "Master, please," he put out his hand, the waves calmed, he walked on water, and he didn't turn around and say, "Well, why didn't you just get out your kit?" There was a kit, and you could read the instructions, and it would have told you how to calm the storm. and would teach you how to walk on water. Instead, he said, "O ye of little faith." O ye of little faith, meaning if you knew who you were, none of these things you're scared of would even exist anymore. So that interests me because, like everybody else, I've been trying to fix it for an awful long time. We're trying to fix it in our own individual lives, and we are trying to fix it on the earth, and particularly in terms of our political situations, in terms of our social situations. If we are honest with ourselves, which we are not as a group, we would admit how depressing this really is. We look at those trains in Madrid. Could happen anytime, anywhere, to any of us. And on some level, I bet that most Americans are surprised something worse hasn't happened since 9/11. And these tapes had come out and they had said to Spain, watch out, we're going to punish you for siding with the United States. And then this happened. And that same group apparently says they're 90% completed on their next attack on the United States. We don't have a public sphere in which to process our grief. We don't have a public realm in which to process our fear. We don't have a public realm in which to process the transformational experience. But that's okay, really, because the group transformational experience is one which simply emerges out of the individual transformational experience. Everybody's talking about this movie, The Passion. Everybody's mesmerized by the suffering of Jesus. But the meaning of the suffering of Jesus, the meaning of Jesus on the cross, is not about Jesus any more than it's about you and me. Because each and every one of us have suffered. If we knew the truth about the person to our left and the person to our right, if we knew the truth about the person in front of us and the person in back of us, we would scarcely be able to contain our compassion and our pity, knowing that there had been times in the middle of the night when they have despaired just as we have. And you know what? I'll tell you something else. If we knew George Bush well enough, we would feel that same compassion and pity for him. And there are people who would kill us if they could, whom, if we knew that about them, we would feel compassion and pity as well. In Rumi, there's a line, a famous poem from Rumi, that talks about out beyond right and wrong, out beyond good and bad, there is a field. I'll meet you there. When Einstein said we will not solve the problems of the world from the level of thinking we were at when we created them, which is to say we won't solve these conflicts from the level of thinking which is the conflict. We really, hearing that, knowing that, studying that, really sense that there is some way in which we're trying to fix things. The cliche about just trying to rearrange the deck chairs on the Titanic. And the older you get, the more you know. Even if you try to fix it here, it'll pop up there. You try to vote it in here, it gets repealed there. You try to win that one there, they don't count the votes. How are we going to pull this off? But maybe in some way, we are being challenged to recognize that there is a realm that surrounds all this. The Course in Miracles says that when a miracle happens, it is a divine intercession from a realm of thinking beyond this one. A divine intercession. And that intercessionary power, which raises the dead, which makes someone capable of walking on water, which parts the Red Sea, which heals the sick, that intercession into the physical material realm is a representation of the miracle of you and me cracking open and no longer being heir to the neuroses, to the thought forms, to the addictions, to the mistakes, to the depression, to the fear. That's what it means for you and me to walk on water. That's what it means for you and me to calm the storms. Those storms are inside us. And those waters that need to part. When the Israelites would go forward, they would drown. If they turned around, they would either be taken back into slavery or killed by the Egyptian soldiers. And so the Red Sea parted, and that's how you and I feel. That's how we feel on this planet right now. That's how we feel as Americans. It's how we feel internally, more than we admit to people. We feel like we're stuck between rocks and hard places all the time. And one rock is this aspect of my personality, and that hard place is another aspect of my personality. And the more work you do, the more you recognize that all the disasters that you meet in your life are actually reflections of the disaster inside yourself. But if all you do is recognize that the disaster emanates from you and you don't know what to do about it, it just makes you more depressed. And you really do begin to realize that without a miracle, you're not going to break free of these patterns. And if you as an individual, me as an individual, if we can't as individuals break free of the patterns that hold us back, how are we going to be conduits? How are we going, all these people, we love to talk, our community is no different than any other community. A bunch of people walking around like we have all the right ideas. If only other people would see it the way we do. But you can't really say that in our presence the world has gotten so much better. And if we're honest, we see the same shadows as you see in any other group. And that's because, as hard as we all try, we get to this door. That door on the other side of which there would be a new freedom. There would be a new joy. There would be a release. There would be something so astounding, but that door is still there. And so many times, that door is represented by the fact that something has hurt us and we can't get past it. And that is our opportunity for enlightenment. Because the you that has been hurt is not the real you. And heaven and earth, the intersecting point of heaven and earth, being on the earth but thinking only the thoughts of heaven, means I'm going to put my cross down. What did I say about Jesus on the cross? I say, get off the cross, we need the wood. So many of us carry this cross. It keeps us from being the people that we are capable of being, but we can't quite get to the resurrection. And we hold it as an ideational construct, whether it's the idea of a peaceful society, a world in which no children are hungry, a world in which all are fed, a world in which there's no needless suffering, a world of freedom, a world of joy, a world of happy people. And we keep saying it, and we keep going year after year after year to these conferences where we say it together, and we keep affirming it. But if we are honest with ourselves, where is this vision? And if it's not going to materialize now, when is it going to materialize? And you say to yourself, well, every generation is like on an assembly line. You know, you might not be here when it happens, and I do love that notion, actually. It doesn't really matter if you actualize the change in your life. What matters, is, for instance, from a Buddhist perspective, is that you die trying. But still, it's going to happen when some generation rushes through the door, when some generation has some critical mass of people who ultimately break open and become new. But what each and every one of us, from a spiritual perspective, need to understand, theoretically, is that Marianne Williamson, for instance, can't break through as long as I'm trying to fix Marianne Williamson. Marianne Williamson can only break through when I get that at the deepest level, I'm not Marianne Williamson. At the deepest level, Michael Lerner isn't Michael Lerner. At the deepest level, Marcy Shimoff isn't Marcy Shimoff. Michael Lerner is a fractal of this huge energy. Marcy is a fractal of a huge energy. Marianne is a fractal of a huge energy, and as long as we are thinking within the box of my story, this is my story, I'm trying to get better, I'm trying to fix it in my story, then we will be stuck in this story. And this story will never go well, because anytime the story is about a person stuck in their story, who's next to a person stuck in their story, who's next to a person stuck in their story, by definition, is not the realm of universal truth, because it's a realm of separate bodies. And in the realm of separate bodies, there will always be hate and fear instead of unity and love. And one of the consequences of that will be, whether it's slavery or the Nazis or the fascists or the terrorists or the whatever form that it is. It's when we break free of the individual story. It's when we break free of the individual story that something happens in us. And then it's so interesting, because then you are not addressing earthly material concerns. The earthly material questions do not grab you the way they used to. You are interested in eternal questions. However, our interest at that point in eternal questions is not the old kind of so-called interest in eternal questions, when really we were using eternal questions as a kind of quasi-spiritual way of avoiding political and social activism. It instead is a realization that the eternal questions are all that matter, because if we allow ourselves to dwell within the eternal question, then and only then do the eternal answers begin to appear. And the eternal answer is not something you know, it's something that you become, and we simply become people in whose presence the sick heal, and in whose presence the Red Sea parts, and in whose presence the dead are brought to life, and in whose presence the water's no big deal to walk on, and in whose presence the communities heal, and in whose presence relationships heal, and in whose lifetime societies turn around, and in whose lifetime war dissolves, and in whose lifetime God himself wipes away all tears. And what will amaze us on that day is that it was so easy once we allowed it to happen. Haven't you ever seen that in your life? When I see the biggest mistakes I've made in my life, and you know, you have to live a certain number of years before words like remorse have any meaning. Right? You have to live a certain number of years before words like regret have meaning. You know, it's like a word like betrayal. You know the word, but until it's happened to you, you don't know the word. And until you've lived enough years where certain options simply aren't going to be available anymore in this lifetime, you don't know from remorse and regret. And I don't know about you, but when I look back at my life and I look at the things that went wrong, and I'm someone who, you know, the vast, vast, vast majority of my misery has been self-inflicted. What stuns me is how time and time again the road was paved with rose petals for me. All I had to do was just dwell within that which was already happening, more calmly, a little happier, and allow things to just be. so much good was trying to happen that I blocked. So much good would have happened that I wouldn't allow to be, or whatever. But what that has shown me, it's not like God's ever out of tricks. Have you ever had the experience of saying to God, is there a plan B? I blew plan A. Is there a plan B? And when you think about God and you consider the awesomeness that would have to be an aspect of God, the first sentence in the Course in Miracles is, there is no order of difficulty in miracles. When we allow ourselves to appreciate what would have to be the infinitude, the infinite, not only the infinite power of God, but the infinite mercy of God. Yeah, I know you blew it in 1975. Yeah, I know you blew it in 1982 also. And I know you blew it, to actually look at your life and to grasp the possibility that there is a God who says, okay, we'll do it another way. We'll do it another place. I mean, to imagine that we could be so loved, to imagine that we could be so approved of, to imagine that we could be so forgiven. When you can just take your own life and allow yourself, I think, to appreciate that God is in the business of lifting souls up. And then, the Course in Miracles says miracles arise from conviction. The traditional Christians are good on the subject of convicted. There's real power in this notion of being convicted. But it's very difficult to be convicted around a principle that we have not lived. So if we're not going to allow the miracle of our own transformation to occur, then there is a limit to how much we can be true conduits or true change agents in order that the world itself transform around us. I mean, if you can't even quite yet be calm when your mother calls, but I think that the intersecting point, that place where heaven and earth are combined, the Course in Miracles says, heaven and earth shall be no more. The line in the Bible, heaven and earth shall be no more, is not a statement that they'll be gone. It's a statement that they will no longer exist as two separate states. The duality will be gone. I remember reading in a Seth book, the Jane Roberts Seth books. I love those books, and they were so formative for me back in the 1970s. And I remember in that book, Seth says that, how in the Western world, basically, for industry's sake, we are awake for a long time and then we sleep for 8 hours or whatever. He says that the more natural way to be would be more like in societies like Greece they do it, where he says in the late afternoon when your blood sugar's low, you should be asleep. And in your middle of the night when the negative ions, when the creative juices, you should be awake. And he says one of the problems with your being awake for such a long time and then asleep for such a long time, he says is that when you're asleep, you're really asleep, and when you're awake, you're really awake. And if your sleep patterns were different, your waking would be more dreamlike and your sleep would be more waking. And that has always felt so right to me. And more in my life as I allow myself, for instance, I'll give you an example, menopausal women. We go around, oh no, it's a hormonal problem, I can't sleep. Hello, we're not supposed to. We're supposed to be dancing under the moon. Ever since I was in my 20s, I would notice at 4:15, I'm up. So for years I walked around, I have this problem, I wake up at 4:15. This is when the witches used to go howl at the moon, More and more, notice all these things that are instinctively happening now, these primal impulses that are just coming up like women dancing together. We understand that women dancing, this is not just lovely. This is like a molecular sacred thing that goes on. The number 13, as I'm sure you know, the reason the early church deemed 13 the number of evil was because it was the witches' number, it was the women's number, it was the day of the month that the witches all gathered on tops of the hills. It was the day that the witches gathered, and witch meant wise woman. So there is within us, and this is also pretty depressing if you think about it a certain way, which I don't suggest you do, I do, enough for you. A lot of the stuff that we're moving towards, and we go, oh, I get it, it should be that way, and you realize they knew that 3,000 years ago. So a lot of the new understanding that we are coming to is so old. It's that we have gotten lost in a mortal domain. We have gotten lost in a realm of collective insanity. It's what Mary Baker Eddy refers to as the mortal mind. It's what the Course in Miracles refers to as the mass hallucination of this plane. The Course in Miracles says this whole world as we know it is a huge dream, but the answer is not to just change the dream. The answer is to know that you make the dream a happy dream so that you can awake. And we start that with our own lives. We have a dream that you were born in 1930-something or 20-something or 40-something or 50-something or 60-something or 70-something. That's a dream. The Course says birth was not a beginning, it's a continuation, and death is not an end, it's a continuation. And we have this dream about where we grew up. And we have a dream about what we've done in our lives. And we have a dream about our credentials. And we have a dream about our accomplishments. And we have a dream about our successes. And we have a dream about our failures. We have a dream about our... I mean, isn't it nice to know some of that stuff didn't really exist? It's when we awaken, we are told in such books as The Course in Miracles, from the belief that that was anything other than a useful fiction for a while. And then the Course in Miracles talks about what happens when we change. What happens when we become that intersecting points? What happens when we become people who are living on the earth but thinking the thoughts of heaven? What happens when we really become spiritual underground? What happens when we still have a body? The Course in Miracles says the things of this world still cling to you. You'll still be in a body, and you'll have clothes, and you'll drive a car, and you'll have a house. You know, you'll be in a place where you are living, and you'll have all the accoutrements of the material realm. But something will have changed in us. And the Course in Miracles says that our forehead will be more serene. And the Course in Miracles says that our eyes will be calmer, and we will smile more frequently. We will have opened the door. Now this, to me, is what's so amazing. The Course in Miracles says that the crucifixion by itself is a meaningless symbol. It's just a setup for the resurrection. When the Israelites were delivered to the Promised Land, that whole story would not have occurred had it not been that they were slaves. There is no great religious tale that does not speak to human suffering. There is no great religious story that does not speak to human suffering. And the resurrection, Jesus didn't say, be of good cheer, I've fixed it. He didn't say, be of good cheer, I killed those bastards. He said, be of good cheer, I have risen. Be of good cheer, I have overcome. Overcome is different than fixing. To overcome means that if I don't forgive everybody and everything, I will never get there. And you say, how can I forgive everybody and everything? Look what they did. And if you're going to look at all the things that have happened in our lives, what's happened in our childhood, what happened in our education, what happened with our political system, what happened with our work lives, you accumulate so much resentment, and you accumulate so much low-grade anger, and sometimes outright rage. And sometimes the forgiveness that's so difficult for us to do is make us for our own selves. We just can't get off it. And every time, the Course in Miracles says you can have a grievance or you can have a miracle. You cannot have both. You can have a grievance or a miracle. You say, well, how can I get over this grievance? They did that. And you feel like to forgive is to somehow condone the behavior. And you come to realize that the only way you can really give a total, complete blanket amnesty to everyone that you've ever known and everything that you've ever been through, including yourself, is if you realize that the story in which you were crucified is not who you are. And that's why we can leave it behind. And otherwise, we carry it, and it's our baggage. And we are getting old, and we are getting tired, and we are getting weary. And there is a heaviness to our lives that we cover up and we try to play with and tinker with around the edges. But there is some radical new beginning that many of us are feeling we thought would be here by now. And so I have come to believe that each and every one of us is carrying the chaos of our times. We are living in times of low-grade fear. I'm not saying that there wasn't low-grade fear before, but there's this new layer of things with the terrorism, with the government. There's so much going on now that we really are reminded of the Yeats poem, Slouching Toward Bethlehem, in which the center is not holding. But the Course in Miracles says only what you are not giving can be lacking in any situation. And I know in my life, if I'm honest with myself, every mistake I've made, I can look back and go, or not even the mistakes that I made, but the mistakes, the things that happened to me, I can see the things that I was not giving. And then once those things have occurred, and you really understand that, it's kind of like when Werner Erhard pointed out that peacock feathers come from the fact that peacocks eat thorns. You realize that that's what's happening to each and every one of us. We are eating thorns. And so when we go, this isn't a beautiful life of a bunch of peacock feathers, I'm eating thorns. And sometimes we don't want to admit it to other people because God knows we've worked on ourselves long enough. What's with these thorns that are still in my mouth? But once you begin to realize I'm eating these thorns because they're supposed to be peacock feathers, and then you say to yourself, but I've eaten enough already. When are the feathers coming? And that's when we realize that we still haven't gotten the point of that suffering yet. And that is that the you that can suffer is not even the real you. The you that could be insulted, the you that could be betrayed, the you that could be abandoned, the you that could be disrespected, the you that could fail, the you that could blow it, isn't even the real you. And so you say to an aspect of yourself, which had its wonderfulness, and which was the best that you could do. It began with the lie of the world that we were taught, which is this is you. You add to that this incredibly narcissistic and self-centered society. Who knew? You add to that even our own community telling, well, what is your intention? What are you going to do? What's your goal? You. And then all of a sudden you get so not about you. I often say to people, I hope you grow as bored with your story as the people around you already are. I mean, that's the weight that we carry, the weight of our story, my issue. So for me, that is where we are now. At least it's where I am, it's where people around me that I see are. That we're standing in front of a door that we know in our hearts we've been standing in front of for years now. And it's not opening. And we know that on the other side of that door is infinite possibility. And there are different ways that you can look at it. You can say God will open the door for us, different images. But on the other side of that door lies a possible paradise on earth. But we're not going to be agents of paradise until we live ourselves in paradise. Gandhi said the end is inherent in the means. Angry people cannot bring peace to the world. And unhappy people can't bring joy to the world. I think that it's time in some way that shows up differently in everybody's life. I'm not claiming to know what the specifics or the substance of any of this is in any individual's life other than my own. But I do know that on some abstract level, it is time for us to understand at the deepest level possible that who we are at the moment is inadequate to the task at hand. But that through the grace of God, we can become radically new and radically different. The Course in Miracles says it's not up to you whether you learn, it's simply up to what you learn, It's simply up to you whether you learn through joy or through pain. In each of our lives, the Course in Miracles says that the Holy Spirit has a highly individualized curriculum for every person. I know in my life, my failure has been that I have not taken that seriously enough, that I ever had the arrogance to think that whatever was in front of me was not exactly to the smallest detail the lesson that God had planned. To the smallest nth detail, whatever your day is, whoever we encounter, whatever the circumstance, that's perfect. That the point is, can I show up as my best within this situation, within this circumstance, within this moment? Can I break free of whatever patterns used to keep me separate from other people, used to keep me from showing up, used to keep me trying to run my own game rather than allowing the universe to show me what it wants? Can I, in this moment, really get at the deepest level, I am only here to represent him who sent me, as the Course says. I am not here, I don't have to be told, know what to do or what to say, for he who sent me will tell me. To really take, when people ask me, what would you advise me about the Course in Miracles? All I ever want to say to someone is take it personally. And whether it's a Course in Miracles or AA or Judaism or Christianity or Hinduism or Muslim, I so think it's irrelevant. I believe that there are universal spiritual themes, and I think for our generation right now, we know what the themes are, but we keep them slightly at bay. We're still keeping them a little abstract, and I think it's when we get how literally true these things are that in this moment, give up anything other than trying to love the person in front of you. Give up anything other than living from the most authentic place we can be. Give up anything other than really addressing the character defects, the weaknesses, the games we play, the different ways that we avoid love, the different ways that we hide from love. So few people in this room really need anybody to tell you what you need to work on. And if you really don't know, your best friends will tell you. Right? The issue now is to know that that door is not going to open for the world until it opens for us. It's not going to open for us until we face these issues that keep us stuck in our own story. And as we break free, as we say, you know what, my little story is so cosmically unimportant. And when I allow that egg shell, the little egg, when it's time for the chicken to burst out of the egg, it begins its beak, it's like, has to get out of the egg, and the eggshell begins to break. You know why? Do you know how the little chicken knows that it's time? Because there is a gaseous element, this toxic gas that fills the egg. And if that chicken doesn't get out of there, that chicken will die. The little chicken is literally dying to be born. And that's where you and I are. We are literally dying to be born. We gotta get out of this eggshell. We gotta get out of this small self. We'll die if we stay in this small self. We'll die if we stay in this small story. Because if we stay in this small story, we stay in limited powers. Marianne Williamson, John Doe, Vicki Schneider, whomever it is, as long as it's one individual thinking of ourselves just as individuals, then we are by definition in limited, diminished force. The Course in Miracles says we are heir to the laws that rule the world that we identify with. And if I think I'm of this world, then I will not be able to walk on water. If I think that I'm on this world, I will not be able to stop the storm. If I think that I'm of this world, I will not be able to part the sea. If I think that I'm of this world, I will not be able to heal the sick. If I think I'm of this world, I will not be able to raise the dead. And if anybody hurts me, and I allow myself to think how awful it is what they did to me, then I'm by definition remaining stuck in this world. I'm relating to my crucifixion, which is by definition my story. And yet so many things, and that's why these thorns happen in our lives, that's why these pains happen in our lives, so that we can get the you that's experiencing this isn't even the real you. And then you are so much bigger, you're not the wave, you're the ocean. You're not the sunbeam, you're the sun. Because there is no place where one sunbeam stops and another starts. There is no place where one wave stops and another starts. But we identify with a little wave instead of getting, dog, I'm the whole ocean. When we realize we are each other, then you say, my God, then I don't have the power of a little wave, I have the power of the ocean. I don't have the power of a little sunbeam, I have the power of the sun. And it's like God is saying, yeah, that's what I've been trying to tell you. Get off that story. Get off that cross. Get out of that slavery to those thought forms that hold you down. You are slave to that small, ridiculous, mortal sense of self. And then dance. Party, be happy. Every amazing insight you need, you'll have. Every amazing ability you need, you'll have. Every amazing contact you need, you'll have. And things will happen. And historians will write about it. And all you need to know is that it will be a good thing. And war will disappear. And hunger will disappear. And all things that are needless suffering in humanity will disappear because we will have gotten off the cross of our misplaced belief in what it means to be human. And that can't happen out there until it happens in here. This is, for all of us now, except the very young, getting on to the final chapter. We have two choices because history will remember us. We will either be cursed or we will be blessed, but we will be remembered. And let's at least know, as I said before, the Buddhists say it doesn't really matter how much you achieve when you die. What matters is that you die knowing that you try. I honestly believe if we try in the ways that I'm talking about, we will not only die knowing we tried, we will die happy because we did it. Thank you very, very much. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. That's very kind of you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, that's so sweet of you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you so much, and I have been told that we now still have about 25 minutes. If you'd like, we can do questions and answers and conversation and discussion. Somebody out there has microphones, and just raise your hand, and Cody will come to you, and let's talk about anything you want to talk about. Ask whatever you want to ask, and have some interaction here. It'll be cool. Okay, who's first?
Hi. It's really good to see you. It's been wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question about, we talk about getting through this stuff. We talk about getting to higher levels. I kind of wanted to know, how necessary is it really from a spiritual and emotional 101 sense, how truly necessary is it to go through the emotional aspect of things? I've had a lot of experience in rebirthing, and in my just narrow experience, it's been so important to go into the very heart emotionally of things in order to get through the other side, where then the spirit can bless that. And I was wondering if you could address that.
Okay, this is a very important subject, but I think something you just said is very significant. So let's deconstruct this because it's important. First of all, and this is how I see it, I think it is very, very important to be in the emotion, to know what we feel, to move through it. When you start denying your emotions around an issue, sort of skipping that part to get to the spirit, and just going, sort of putting the spirituality on top of it. I'm not unhappy, you know, I'm too spiritual to be unhappy. I get that it's not real. No, it's very important that we be in the emotion. However, something you just said was very significant. You said, sometimes I feel I have to get through the emotion in order to get to. Do not kid yourself. Just moving through the emotion does not of itself get us to the spiritual. Are you with me? See, because the ego and the spirit will both use the emotion. And one thing the ego does with emotion is try to suppress it. But then when you get smart and you say, oh no, I know that's not real. I'm not going to go there. That's low level. I'm not going to suppress my emotion. The ego, which is always out to screw you however it can, then says, oh, you're right. You're right. You have to feel your emotion ad infinitum. You with me? You with me? So it's either not enough or enough already. Right? So what I see in my life is it's not either or. I remember once I was in a relationship, and the relationship ended, and I was absolutely heartbroken. It was just one of those, I just couldn't stop crying. And my best friend, Richard, was saying to me, only the love is real. It's only the form that is changing. And every time he'd tell me something, I, oh, God, and I remember once he looked at me and he said, you want me to shut up now? And I said, no, I don't want you to shut up. Because while I'm crying, I need to hear this information. Because we're talking there metaphysically and metaphorically the 3 days between the crucifixion and the resurrection. And is your 3 days going to be 3 minutes, 3 days, 3 months, 3 years, 3 whatever? I went through something recently. It had been 2 weeks after the event, and my girlfriend Marcy was in the house, and she said, okay, if you guys are still going to talk about this, if you're still going to obsess about this, I'm leaving. I said, this is not called obsession. This is called processing. If I'm still saying it a year from now, you can tell me I'm obsessed. But no healthy person 2 weeks out is not still discussing this. And even though the emotions have been very difficult for me, because it's actually been a devastating experience in my life, the spiritual work goes on as well. And that's what I find, you know. In fact, the pain is what's driven me into the Course in Miracles, reading the Course in Miracles, all that much deeper, those chapters I don't like to look at. Have you ever noticed that, you know, we say, well, wherever you open it is what's right. You know, you say that to yourself by the Bible test. Whatever it opens is right. Have you ever had the experience of you open it and go, oh, well, that couldn't possibly... That's not what I need. This is not about forgiveness. This is not about me having to, you know, right? So that's how I feel. Feeling the emotion is very important, but it's not like and the psychological work is important, obviously, but it's not like you wait till that's over before doing the spiritual work. And it's also, they don't, so no, sometimes you might even say that certain things appear to contradict each other, but they don't. They actually don't. It's that intersecting point. With my human self, I'm feeling the pain. With my higher mind, I'm getting that this is not real. While I feel the pain, I allow to feed myself through meditation, through reading, and the two come together and become as one. Does that make sense? Okay, who's next? What's next? Somebody over there?
Thank you so much for being here this evening.
Thank you.
And I just wanted to tell you that my shell cracked open just today, and it's absolutely beautiful. I have no words for it, but just to tell you, thank you for acknowledging everything that you tell us, and to tell everyone here that it sure makes smiling a whole lot easier. Bless you for everything.
You know, it's kind of like when I was a little girl, we used to have this thing called Ada pearl necklaces. Did anybody else have an Ada pearl necklace? And you had a chain. You know, I got to say something really interesting. I just had an interesting moment for myself. When I was a little girl, I loved my Ada pearl necklace. Then for about 30 years, I thought it was the quaintest, silliest idea I'd ever heard of. And when I just mentioned it, my honest thought was, I should get one of those for my little girl, you know? Because it's, you know, once you have kids, it's all different. Anyway, for the chain, you have a pearl. You get one pearl at your birthday, and you get another pearl at Christmas or Hanukkah, and you get another pearl because you won your tournament or whatever. And that, in my experience, is how enlightenment is. Like when this woman just said, today her shell cracked open. You know, it's wonderful to hear that, and I have moments and hours and sometimes whole days when I say that's my experience as well. But it's like that add a pearl necklace. I think, you know, in a lot of the born-again Christians, for instance, their concept is you get it once and that's it. The higher consciousness perspective is not that. You get it once, and you know how the universe is. It's like the top of one mountain is the bottom of the next. It's basically easy to be enlightened and in bliss when everybody's treating you well. You know? I mean, the thing is, you know, I always feel like the universe says, Marianne, you're doing so well. You're so serene, lots of harmony, bliss, happiness. Can you take that? When I wrote A Return to Love, I marvel at that book. I marvel that I was once a person who wrote in a book, you know, like when terrible things happen and you have to forgive. I'll tell you something really terrible that happened, and like I had to forgive. This guy like stood me up for a date. That's in that book. Remember? And not only that, all the people said to me, oh, I love that story, I love this. I mean, today, I can't even imagine. I look back with great, you know, fondness, and you know, that was the image that came to me of, you know, sometimes things are hard to forgive. Like, let me tell you what happened to me. This guy was supposed to come over, and he didn't. So then when I wrote that book, it was so easy for me to write about forgiveness because nobody really knifed me in the back yet. It was real easy for me to talk about non-attachment to things. I had nothing. You know? I remember I used to go through the mall, and it was a serene experience. I knew I couldn't buy anything, so it really wasn't it. It was like going to a museum. It's when you know you could buy one of the dresses but not both of the dresses that the stress kicks in. I don't know how we got there. Oh, I know, it's about having the shell crack open. Yeah, I mean, I'm happy for you, and I hope it continues, and I hope you're like an enlightened master, and it's now and for all time. But I do think, what'd you say? Yeah, you too. Well, I hope that, and hey, I hold to that, you know, and if it's the case, Cody, she should be speaking at the next Prophets Conference. But I do think, quite seriously, going back to what I said before, I think this is a very difficult moment on the planet, not only, obviously, politically and socially. I think psychologically and emotionally it's very difficult, too, for the reasons I said. It's like a hologram. The war on terrorism and terrorism itself is living itself out inside each and every one of us. We are our own terrorist, and we are fighting the terrorists. And we are making the same mistake inside that we're making outside, just trying to suppress rather than listen. All right, okay. Anybody else? Somebody over here and somebody over there.
Hi. I wanted to ask about your foundation, the Renaissance Foundation, because some of what's happening for me standing and hearing you and the laughter and the response, and from what I heard them announce about your project and nonviolent demonstration, I know at times like this we're at what Jean Houston calls jump time.
Yes.
And it's going to change fast and furious. Like we have 10 years and we can turn it around and really have paradise on earth again, I think.
Right.
An artist friend of mine in Sebastopol stood over along an apple orchard the other day and said this. He said he can already see it, and I've been seeing it for years. So I'm curious, and I want to invite you to support a renaissance of street theater and artistry in the streets and speaking. I mean, you're better than David Letterman up there.
Oh, thank you.
I mean, you're really, I adore you. I've never read one of your books or heard you speak, but I was sent here to meet you, so
thank you.
It's an absolute delight.
That's very sweet of you to say. Thank you. In terms of the Renaissance Alliance, and you can go to my website at marianne.com, and I hope you will, and I hope you'll sign up on the mailing list there so I can tell you about cool things when they're happening. You can go from there to all the information about the GRA and the lobbying effort for the U.S. Department of Peace. I'm sure many of you already know about it. It's quite simply the notion that we must become as sophisticated in the ways that we wage peace as we are now sophisticated in the ways that we wage war. When a person gets sick today, if you are of a certain consciousness, you would go to the allopathic doctor perhaps, but you would not want only to hear what the allopathic doctor would say. You wouldn't want to hear only what the surgeon would say. You would also want to hear what a holistic practitioner would say. You'd want to hear what the Ayurvedic person would say. You would want to hear what the nutritionist would have to say, etc. So the whole idea of a Department of Peace is the idea that the President of the United States, in his or her cabinet, you know, a Department of Defense is like a surgeon. You can't blame the surgeon for reporting through the filter of a surgeon's eyes. And you can't blame a Department of Defense for giving you a military perspective, because that's what that department is about. But wouldn't it be incredible if there was one cabinet secretary whose cabinet-level department existed for one purpose, and that was to research and articulate and facilitate nonviolent options to domestic and international conflicts. Wouldn't it be incredible if something's going on internationally or domestic, the president hears from the Secretary of State, which is only international and is only diplomatic state to state. It doesn't get below the state level, and it doesn't do domestic. The president hears from state, the president hears from the Department of Defense, and then the president would turn over to the Secretary of the Department of Peace and say, what do you got? You know, we can statistically predict when there's going to be an outbreak of violent conflict. If you have high infant mortality, lack of access to markets, and lack of access to governmental influence, then we can rationally, safely, unfortunately predict that there will be violent conflict within 22 months. High infant mortality, lack of access to markets, and lack of access to governmental influence. It's real simple. Totally, you've got to be really poor when you've got that level of high infant mortality, poverty, no access to markets, no access to governmental influence, complete helplessness and despair. You have that level of helplessness and despair, you can predict there will be violent conflict within 22 months. Imagine if all international policy of the United States, if it was vetted by a Department of Peace, which said you might want to think about that because what you're doing will actually exacerbate rather than diminish the chances for violent conflict within 22 months. So that's what the Global Renaissance Alliance is about. It's about the lobbying effort and moving into the C4 lobbying effort for the U.S. Department of Peace. Okay, one more, is that right? Or
Thank you.
two more?
Hello.
Hi.
I usually listen to you while I'm jogging, so it's kind of disorienting to actually see you.
Actually have a person. We could get one of those, you know, like when the people jog with babies.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
you could put a little TV screen.
Yeah, that'd be good. I've been reading you, reading your books and listening to your tapes for years, and just to be able to ask you this one question specifically is so great for me, but it has to do with the ego and judgment and the whole concept of, it's a little sort of glitch that I haven't been able to figure out about judging the ego.
Yeah.
Because I get kind of caught in that part where it's like, oh, my ego, oh, I hate my ego, what a horrible ego, you know? And then I end up going, oh, I think that was my ego.
Yeah. Or then people tell you you have so much ego,
Yeah.
when by definition pointing out someone's ego is your ego.
Yeah.
That's big in the spiritual world, judgment in the name of non-judgment.
Exactly. And so when you say my ego is vicious at best and suspicious, or
Yeah.
suspicious, whatever,
Yeah.
I say, oh, what a horrible ego, you know? And so I guess I'm looking for sort of a way out of that judgment.
Well, intuitively, you know the way out of it, though. As the Course in Miracles points out, these are only words. Words are at
Right.
best symbols of things. This is, you know the answer there. Do you know what I'm saying? I
Yeah.
mean, they have to come up with a word. It's for construct. It's a belief system. The ego is no, you know, to hate your ego. I mean, your ego isn't where you're bad. It's where you're wounded. Every place we're afraid. I mean, think about it. You know, it's so hard to see this in the case of other people, but so easy to see in the case of yourself. Anytime you're obnoxious, anytime you're off, anytime you're out, it's because in that moment you don't know how to do it right and still get your needs met. Something happened. It could have been pre-verbal. When you were a baby, you were abused as a child, or you were abused as an adult. Nobody wakes up and says, I want to be obnoxious today. Now, you're obnoxious, and somebody else would look at you and go, quite an ego you have. But it's not where you're bad. Those were the places where you're wounded. That's why the Course in Miracles says that everything is either love or a call for love.
Yeah.
So you're right. The ego is not something to be down on ourselves for having, because the part of you that would be down on yourself is your ego.
Yeah, exactly. Great.
And that's why the Course in Miracles says, you know, I cannot release from you what you will not take. I will not take from you what you will not release to me. It's like you recognize your character defects, as they say in AA. You recognize a weakness, and you surrender it. You place it on the altar. God doesn't judge you for it. He wants to heal you for it. He doesn't punish you for it. You know, that notion that you're not punished for your sins. You're punished by your sins. Sin is an archery term, and the Christian religion moved into this, you're a sinner and you're going to be punished and go to hell for that. The Course in Miracles says, no. Your sin means your miscreative thought. It's a thought. It's like an archery term. You missed the mark. God doesn't look at it and want to punish you. God sees it as a mistake that he wants to correct. And hell isn't something God's going to send you to because you were bad. Hell is the anxiety and depression and despair that you are in because you were having that mental miscreation.
That's beautiful.
You know, we're not going to be compassionate for other people. We can't be compassionate towards ourselves.
Thank you so much.
We'd do better if we knew how. And
A couple more.
Yes.
Hi, I have all your books, and I've read them probably 2 and 3 times on my
Thank you.
treadmill.
I'm honored to hear you say
on
that.
my treadmill every day.
Thank you.
They're great. My question is, why don't you rewrite A Return to Love, because it's so wonderful. I give it as gifts.
Thank you.
And why don't you update it with new stories, not the dating story?
Yeah, you love it. I
Thanks.
can't even. And then he stood me up, and I had to like bless him. And it was so hard. I'm writing a book right now called The Gift of Change, and I've said to my publisher quite a few times that I think this is Return to Love Part 2. It's very much about the principles in the Course in Miracles, particularly the workbook. So hopefully, you know, what happened is I'm sure many of you know, there was a very heavy constriction around writing about the Course in Miracles after Return to Love, and then the copyright was given to someone who really wanted to limit it. There's recently been a court case, and it seems that we're a little freer. So I've been writing about the Course in Miracles as best I could for the last 10 years but I couldn't say it as, you know what I'm saying? You couldn't really be out there. But now it seems, the case is on appeal, but it seems we're freer. I think you will feel that more from this book. Does that make sense? Thank you very much, though.
Hi, Marianne. I had the pleasure of doing a workshop with you at Echelon.
Wow, that was a long time ago,
It
huh?
was a few years back.
Yeah, thank you.
And at the time, I was in hell.
We've all been there a few times.
Yeah. Unable to see the rose petals, just dwelling on my story. Lots of therapy, lots of different modes. But I have to say, this is a testimony to turning it over to the Holy Spirit. When I finally hit the bottom and I gave it all up and turned it over, my life changed within 2 weeks.
Wow.
And I really have a lot of that inner peace and joy. And I'm an old lady, and I worked real hard to get here. But it was fast when I turned it over to the Holy Spirit. And my question is this. I've learned that I can't do it myself because it is an ego structure. if it's a collective ego structure, if everybody prayed and turned it over to the Holy Spirit, what would happen?
There's a line in the Course in Miracles where it says, some people would rather die than change their mind. And Western civilization is behaving that way. It's considered such blasphemy. You know, Jesus says in the Bible, pray for your enemies, bless those who curse you. But if within the public realm you were to say, let's just take a day to pray for our enemies, to see Jesus with his arms around every terrorist, to see Jesus with his arms around every terrorist doesn't mean you're asking that the terrorists get what they want. You are asking that the terrorists be returned to sanity and that you be returned to sanity. Now, that's not as depressing as I used to think it was, because the public realm of political and social discussion is not where eternal things are discussed. The point is that that is the role, I think it's the role of religion in a society, but as we know, organized religion in America has become a handmaiden of the materially oriented status quo. So for us to forge a new realm is to say that regardless of whether other people want to do it or not, our choice is to do what this woman just said. Every day to know that, just like with holistic medicine, we came to understand that it's not enough to just do the allopathic work, to just address the issues of the body. We want to address the issues of the mind and the issues of the spirit. The most prestigious academic institutions in the United States have now statistically verified, substantiated, that people who have been diagnosed with life-challenging illnesses live on average twice as long after diagnosis if they attend a spiritual support group. Your oncologist, instead of rolling his or her eyes, is today probably the first person to tell you to get yourself over to one of those groups. Now, what Gandhi and Dr. King were talking about with nonviolence is to politics what holistic medicine is to healing. It's the notion that there are psychological, emotional, and spiritual realms to healing the political and social relationships as well. So you can look at the traditional politician as the allopathic healer of politics and society. And then we must come up now with this holistic realms. We pray, including praying for the terrorists. We can visualize and pray that our cities be shielded. We can literally, in the name of God, command hatred to depart. There is so much that we can do in the realm of our own meditations on a daily basis to wash clean this world. When we came together tonight, the beautiful bowls and the beautiful meditation was to pray for healing for the world. That was lovely. We should all be doing just that at least 20 minutes every day. Anything else? That one person over there?
Hi. Being one of those children of the 60s and having experienced so much with the anti-war demonstrations and the sit-ins and everything we worked and strived for and thought we were succeeding at when President Nixon was
Yes.
gone.
He was
and
president.
Yeah, he was, unfortunately.
Today, the guy looks good.
Yeah.
He looks liberal today.
He looks
He
really
founded,
good.
you know, quite seriously, he founded the Environmental Protection Agency. He started the Environmental Protection Agency that George Bush is trying to gut. Richard Nixon founded it. And you know what else about Richard Nixon? He was the first president to say that the Native Americans in this country should be determining their own fate. White people should not be determining it for them. That was Richard Nixon.
That's absolutely right. However, the one thing that frightens me is that we baby boomers seem to have forgotten what we fought so hard to achieve. And now we're faced with an apathetic society and so much social Darwinism, that to get these thoughts that we feel so strongly for, and I know there's many of us who want that wonderful power that we once had of enlightenment with and without drugs, but how do we reach those people that were there in the 60s but are no longer there?
Well,
There were so
yeah,
many of us.
Yeah, I mean, the problem is not just that we're living in an apathetic society. We were living in an apathetic society then, too. The real problem is that a lot of the people who were doing that in the 60s have now become the apathetic ones.
Right.
That's number one. Number two, I think that for many of us, you know, during the 1960s, we knew what to do. It was very specific. We were trying to stop a war, for instance. And in those days, we thought, we were very naive. It was almost quaint. We saw peace as synonymous with an absence of war. Right? So peace movement, anti-war movement was the same thing in those days. Mm-hmm. But we realize now that it's more than just ending one war. It's, as Franklin Roosevelt said, ending the beginnings of all wars. And we have become more sophisticated in our understanding, too, that we have to do, you know, as I said earlier, an angry generation does not bring peace to the world. I was an angry peace activist, right?
Right.
So we know that we must, as Gandhi said, be the change. So I think in part, number one, too many of us have become the apathetic ones. Number two, we realize that we have to change within ourselves in the direction we want the world to change. Number three, I think many people really have come to believe that the kind of political changes that we struggled for, that there are other levels of change that people are working on. I also think a lot of times just because somebody's not doing something out there doesn't mean they're not working it in here. And I also believe that what marching through the streets was in the 1960s, marching through the halls of Congress is today. And that's why something like the Department of Peace matters. You could have 10,000 people on the mall in front of the Capitol marching for the Department of Peace, and that would have a fraction of the effect of 100 people walking through the Senate and House office buildings, going to their Congress people, lobbying for the bill. It was Eisenhower, a Republican president, who said politics should be the part-time profession of every American citizen. This is my belief. Meditate in the morning, lobby in the afternoon, have fun at night.
Amen to that.
Thank you very, very
Thank
much.
you.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.